So today we're going to talk about blood pressure. And the story that I have for you with blood pressure will be a little bit different than what we've thought about with blood pressure and how medicine looks at blood pressure on a couple of the different fronts. And so the first thing I want to explain is this concept which is known as homeostasis. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term before. I remember way back in pharmacy school, that was literally the first thing that we got a lecture on. And the short version of it is that that is a term that represents the body's ability to maintain life under any circumstances. The body will do what it needs to do to maintain viability. The process is called homeostasis. Well, as it turns out, the genesis of what we consider disease in our, in this culture, especially all of the diseases of aging, is actually just homeostasis in action. It's really the body doing what it's supposed to do to be able to preserve life, and that's the case with blood pressure as well. Here's an example of this, though. With osteoporosis, your blood pH needs to be maintained in a very narrow window, and if it sways from that window in very small amounts, you literally would die. And so the body has very keen mechanisms to maintain your blood pH. One of those mechanisms is to borrow minerals from the bones to be able to buffer to make sure that that pH is right. And so actually osteoporosis in this country is because of our diets and our habits which are acidifying. We drink a soda, it acidifies our system, the body, or caffeine or sugar or animal proteins or grains. Our body has one choice to buffer, and that is to borrow minerals from the bones. And that's why we have thinning bones in this country. It's actually homeostasis in action. It's making a short-term change that allows for life that ultimately will make a long-term change down the road. And it's the same thing with blood pressure as well, and we'll get into that a little bit. So one, I wanted to explain that. Number two, again, I just want to sort of go over real quickly this idea of genetics, because what we get from our parents are tendencies. And so we may have a tendency towards having high blood pressure, but your genes have the opportunity to express themselves in a way that you end up having high blood pressure and problems from that, or you never have any problems with it. And what's the difference between those two extremes? Diet, exercise, lifestyle. How you bathe your genes and your experiences. So again, the same thing, homeostasis in action. If you have certain lifestyle choices that cause changes, then your body will respond in a way to preserve life in the short term. So here's how it works with blood pressure. For many people, blood pressure starts to elevate as we get older. And what actually is happening is that your blood vessels are supposed to be pliable. As fluid goes through them, they sort of vibrate, or they move like this. And as we get older, our blood vessels become stiff, kind of like a hose that's left in the yard all summer long. It gets stiff. And when it gets stiff, blood can't flow through it as easily. Now, the purpose of blood flowing through your body is to deliver oxygen and nutrition and pull away waste from all of your tissues. Well, if it's not as easy to get blood through those tubes, and there's, some 60,000 miles of tubing in your body here, what does the body do to more accurately or more to better deliver oxygen and nutrition and pull away waste? It increases the pressure at the pump to be able to move that fluid all through all those tubes. So again, why do our blood vessels get stiff? Doesn't happen to all of us. One, genetic tendency. But two, fats are what makes these blood vessels pliable. And for how many years have we been told that we should be on a low-fat diet? And that low-fat diet has led to more stiff arteries, which means blood pressure goes higher. Does that make sense? And so really, this is homeostasis in action. Is that if as you're getting older, your blood vessels are getting stiffer, increasing blood pressure is actually your body doing exactly what it should do to be able to preserve life, right? Now, there are other reasons why blood pressure can go up as well, and again, it's homeostasis in action, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So that makes sense, right? How do we diagnose high blood pressure issues? I think that the way we do it in this country is actually sort of faulty, because we have a tendency to go to the doctor. The doctor measures your blood pressure. If it looks like it's elevated, the doctor may say to you, hey, blood pressure looks a little high, go home, get some exercise, lose some weight, come back in 6 weeks, blood pressure's still elevated, put you on a pill to lower the blood pressure. Well, the failing in that is two things. Number one, your blood pressure is supposed to go up and down throughout the day depending on your stimulus. And so your blood pressure is not like this all day long. You go out and you go for a jog, your blood pressure is going to go up. You go to sleep, your blood pressure is going to go down, or should go down. And it goes up and down throughout the day. So just measuring that one time when you're in the doctor's office may not be the most accurate. Also, studies have shown that when you're communicating with somebody, your blood pressure goes up. When you're communicating with somebody that's of a higher intellectual status, your blood pressure goes up even more. I just described your relationship with your doctor. You go to the office, you sit around longer than you should because you had a reservation, but even though that reservation was for 12 o'clock, he doesn't see you till 1:30, he or she, right? Then you sit in a room in a cold room in a paper dress for another, hour, 45 minutes or whatever, and then what do? They check your blood pressure. Well, that's going to have a tendency to have that blood pressure be elevated, and I think that there's a lot of people that have sort of an artificially elevated measurement because of those circumstances. And then we make clinical decisions based on that. So I always say to my patients that if 99.9% of the time your blood pressure is normal and it's only high in the doctor's office, don't go to the doctor's office because that's what the blood pressure problem is. So really, the better way, if you go to the doctor and it looks like it's elevated, the best thing to do is start checking your blood pressure at home at different times so that you can see what the tendency is. If the tendency of your blood pressure is actually high, it needs to be addressed. It's not, it's not something that we should take lightly. But I want to make sure we properly diagnose it. The other thing that medicine is really good at doing is sort of, I call it creating sick people. 10 years ago, you didn't have a term that was known as pre-hypertensive. Now you do. And it was just one big fell swoop by medicine saying, okay, here's a whole nother category of people that we can treat. And it is now standard medical practice to actually medicate people that are pre-hypertensive. And so again, I just want to make sure that if we think we have a blood pressure issue, that we want to diagnose it appropriately. And so it should be done throughout the day so that we know how high. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. No, because it should go up and down, right? And so I counsel people to really do it at different times and keep track of it so that we can see what that up and down is, and then we can get a median, and then we know. There are some people that when you wake up first thing in the morning, your blood pressure is lowest. That's somebody that sleeps well. Somebody that has sleep apnea, that isn't oxygenating their system very well, they can wake up with high blood pressure because it's very stressful to the body. It's good to know if that's what the issue is, because if that's what the issue is really, taking a medicine isn't going to change that. It's going to artificially lower the blood pressure all the rest of the time, which can not feel good and can affect energy, can actually interfere with the body doing what it's supposed to do, right? We talked about homeostasis. For many people, when they get on a blood pressure medicine, within a period of time, sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 6 months or a year, the most common complaint I get, decreased energy. Well, if we're interfering with the body delivering oxygen and nutrition the way it wants to, I would expect for that to happen, right? So what's happening with high blood pressure? Lack of healthy fats is far and away the most common time that happens, especially if it's that pattern where as you start to get older, the blood pressure is slowly going up. That's usually what the issue is. That's not the issue for a 25-year-old who has a high blood pressure issue. It's not the issue for somebody that is all of a sudden in a stressful situation where their blood pressure is skyrocketing. But for that trend where it just is slowly going up as time goes on, it's usually about healthy fats. It can also be about mineral balance because your blood vessels are actually muscle. They're smooth muscle. And those muscles have the ability to relax or contract. And what allows for those muscles to relax or contract are certain minerals. And there has to be a balance with those minerals. Magnesium, potassium, and sodium are the important ones for that to happen properly. And so sometimes the problem is an imbalance with those minerals. That can happen because of your exercise. There's some people who exercise and they lose the minerals with their sweat and they're not replacing them appropriately. They might have that tendency towards having those blood vessels not relax properly. Yeah, you hear that a lot, and I'm not a big proponent of that. You do hear that. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me repeat the question. So she asked about, is that why you hear about people supposedly having to cut down on salt when when you have a high blood pressure issue. There are a very small segment of the population who salt in and of itself is actually causing the blood pressure issue. And so for the vast majority of people that have a high blood pressure problem, lowering your salt intake really doesn't affect that. However, it is an issue between sodium and potassium. Many of us get entirely too much sodium in our diet without getting enough potassium. So we should get potassium in fruits and vegetables. Every fruit and vegetable has appreciable amounts of potassium in them, some more than others. You heard about oranges and bananas having more potassium. But the problem isn't really too much salt, it's too much sodium chloride and getting too much sodium out of balance of potassium. So one of the remedies would be, or one of the recommended changes would be not to avoid salt, but maybe switch to more of a sea salt that has a full array of minerals, not just sodium chloride in it. It has potassium chloride and magnesium and other minerals in it, more in a balance. Make sense? Yeah.
So you mentioned the salt and potassium. Was there any other minerals?
She's asking if there are any other minerals that play a role, and magnesium is a very important one. And don't make me get ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about magnesium a lot because it's a really important supplement with the relaxation of those blood vessels. Right. Kind of a hidden thing that people are not recognizing as a real risk factor for high blood pressure is sugar and insulin resistance, your body not handling sugar very efficiently. And a key culprit that plays a role with making blood pressure go too high is high fructose corn syrup. This is a form of sugar that the food industry loves to use for two reasons. It's easily transportable and it's very inexpensive. And it's probably a third reason that less educated people haven't caught on yet, in that it's actually sugar. You can put high fructose corn syrup on a label and some people might not recognize that that's actually sugar.
And they even have those ads on TV where they see this beautiful woman in a cornfield telling you how it's just corn, what's the problem? But
right.
That's actually completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it is from corn, but
well,
just because something's from
yes.
nature doesn't mean it's good for you. Arsenic is also completely natural. So I wrote a nice article, it's a little bit political, but it's also, I think, very interesting about high fructose corn syrup that's on our website. That if you went and read, you'd say, all right, I can't have it in my diet anymore. And the problem is that it shows up in places that you wouldn't expect it to be, because we're used to having things taste a certain way, and if we're cutting down on fat in our diet, it gets replaced with sugar one way or another because it has to taste a certain way. So you can find high fructose corn syrup, obviously in sodas and that kind of thing, but high fructose corn syrup are in things like
ketchup, exactly.
Yeah, ketchup,
Tomato
dressings,
tomato sauce.
Tomato sauces. Like, you open up a natural tomato sauce for your pasta. Not a big fan of pasta anyways, you guys know that. But you'll see high fructose corn syrup in there. And that needs to be eliminated completely, and that is a real risk factor for high blood pressure. And then the last thing, this may seem obvious, it may not, is stress. Stress definitely plays a role with raising your blood pressure. Now, again, it's homeostasis. Back in caveman times, saber-toothed tiger jumps in the cave, blood pressure goes up. So that way your body is more efficient at delivering oxygen to your muscles so that you can run or fight. I mean, but then it's supposed to go back down. And for chronic stress, we have that tendency to increase it. Also, that genetic component to it. The constant cortisol, the constant, chemical environment that we make because of stress has a tendency to make those genes express themselves in a negative way. So if that's your tendency, you're going to have a tendency to have high blood pressure. So family history of high blood pressure and stress makes that problem, even more.
And I also want to point out that emotional stress is as important as physical, because there's absolutely no distinction between the mind and body. And we know that more and more in science and more in, the experiments that they're doing to see that every emotion you have is translated physically somehow or other. And so the emotional stress of holding back feelings, of not expressing, especially anger and fear, exactly, those tend to create more high blood pressure. So we really want to be self-aware and know that and begin to process our feelings as well.
If I had said this the other day, that every cell in your body is eavesdropping on what's going on in between your ears. And so you having a fear of something, your body thinks that whatever it is that you're having a fear of is actually happening. It's real, and your body will respond like it's supposed to based on that. So if you fear that a bear is about to jump out at you while you're walking in the woods, your body is actually preparing for that bear to jump out at you. And that means blood pressure going up, heart rate going up, blood getting shunted away from gut and to muscles so that you can run or fight. Blood sugar going up so that you have fuel for that running or fighting. Yeah. Did you have a question? No?
Does that also happen when you're dreaming?
Does it also happen when you're dreaming? Yep.
It does, yes.
Really good question. And we just did a couple of webinars on sleep and or seminars on sleep. And yeah, people get a cortisol spike in the middle of the night, sometimes from fearful things like that, and it wakes them up. And again, the same result.
The subconscious mind cannot discern between reality and illusion, and so that's exactly why that happens. The dream is just as real to your subconscious mind as any other waking experiences. Yeah.
Cool. So just want to say a quick word about prescription medicines and what they actually do for blood pressure. So there's a whole category of medicines specifically for blood pressure. There are diuretics, there are beta blockers, there are ACE inhibitors, there are calcium channel blockers, and they're all big chemical names for monkeying with chemistry to cause either relaxation of that smooth muscle, which are the blood vessels, or of some bleeding out of the fluid in that closed, what's supposed to be a closed system of, fluid that's going through your body. All of those things can treat high blood pressure and can lower your blood pressure, but they're not fixing the underlying issue. Sometimes they're hiding the underlying issue. And my experience, and this was really what got me to start to look at health in a different way back when, was people that are treated for high blood pressure, take a medicine, blood pressure goes down. What is typical is that sometime within the next 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, blood pressure starts to go up again. Now in pharmacy school we're taught that's a worsening condition and we either need to up the dose or we need to add medicines, and that's a stepwise approach that is protocol for medicine to do that. But it isn't really. It's not a worsening condition. Elevated blood pressure is not a disease. It's a way of your body talking to you, saying something is not right. What you do with those medicines is we turn down the volume. And the body eventually says, wait, you're not listening to me. I'm going to turn the volume back up. And then we up the ante a little bit and we turn the volume down. And we play that game for quite a long time. But it's not fixing the problem, and there can be some other side effects or negative effects of those medicines that we use. And so what we're going to do is sort of present different ways to understand and treat elevated blood pressure if it needs to be treated. Right? So want to talk a little bit about diet. Diet plays a very important role with this. I talked about sugar. And so sugars in the diet in the forms of things like high fructose corn syrup, even just the foods that raise the blood sugar quickly, like grains, like pasta and cereal and bread, and then obviously cakes and candy and all those sorts of things, can definitely play a role with this. Not having enough protein in your diet can play a role with this. Fruits and vegetables also have those minerals that I was talking about that help balance things properly. Any fruit or any piece of vegetable that you eat will have potassium in it. Some more than others, but if you want to balance it properly, you need to get enough. Same thing with magnesium. Unfortunately, the estimates are that some 80 to 90% of us are deficient in magnesium, and it's nearly impossible to get enough of it from our diet because of the way things are grown today and because of what we do to the food. And so deficiencies in magnesium in the public were starting to be recognized by the government and studied back in the 40s. And so it's really hard to get enough magnesium.
And some of the things you can see from not having enough magnesium, not that this is the case for everybody, but it does show up as more anxiety, and it also shows up as tension in the body, like restless leg syndrome and things like that. So balancing your magnesium, or at least having enough in your body, can be really helpful for everything to just feel better.
Yeah. Interesting. From the inside... What was that?
I was just going to ask, what's a typical dose of it then? Like, how much do we need?
Yeah, that's a good question. She asked what the dosage is, and we'll go over that specifically in the kind of dosages that we talk about, and the forms, because that also makes a difference. But interestingly, when we're tense, our muscles will get tense. But sometimes it's the other way around. If muscles are not relaxed, you're sort of sending a signal from the outside world to your body. There's something to be tense about, and that can actually, fuel its own pump to make things worse. Yeah.
Is that our segue into relaxation?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, making some changes in diet can be helpful with blood pressure as well. The typical changes that medicine supports is cutting down on fat in your diet, and I'm here to tell you that's just the opposite. And I always tell people, if you're eating a food that says recommended by the American Heart Association, it's probably not so healthy for you. They're using old technology and old ideas that time is proving are worthless, really. So, stress reduction, big issue.
Yes. So the first thing in stress reduction is always the breathing. If you were here the other day, you might have heard me say that we just don't breathe properly anymore. When we're babies breathe through the whole body, from the pelvis all the way up to the shoulders. And that's a normal way to breathe. But by the time we're 12 years old, we've experienced enough stress in our life that we tend to just breathe from our chest. And oftentimes we breathe in but not out very well. Actually, that's the stress breath. You think that the stress breath is just fast-paced and in your chest, but really you're not actually exhaling. So one of the best ways to teach yourself to breathe when you want to lower blood pressure is slow, long, complete exhalations. So it's a breath in, filling the whole body from the belly up to the shoulders, and then exhaling completely and taking it all out. Because the exhalations are the release. They're the relaxation of the muscles. So this is a really important thing. You can practice this on your own very easily, but it's often about retraining the body to do this. And the first step is to just notice your breathing. And notice, are you breathing out? Notice when you're not. Notice what times of day or what situations that you're in that you're holding your breath. Most of us hold our breath so much more than we even recognize until we start paying attention to it. You're smiling.
Well, like 8 to 5.
Yes, like 8 to 5, right, exactly. Exactly. And you may find that as you start breathing more efficiently and effectively that you feel tired, and it's because your muscles are finally relaxing. There is a subtle difference between relaxation and actually falling asleep. But most of us don't ever know what that is. We're either awake and wired or sleeping. And we, as a culture, we have to get back to this place where we know what relaxation is.
And can get there.
Yeah. So, this is something definitely you can do on your own. You can learn in yoga classes and things like that. But I also want to talk about this biofeedback machine that you can purchase. It's about $300. And it hooks you up to the machine, and you have these headphones on. And the machine monitors your inhale and exhale. And it feeds it back to you in a tone. So it shows you this is what it sounds like when you breathe in. This is what it sounds like when you breathe out. And then it gets you into a pattern. And it's just the way to practice the same thing that I'm talking about, but having some help doing it, so you're not doing it by yourself, and it can work you into being able to do it more easily. And it's been proven that as we breathe out more slowly and more completely, all those muscles begin to relax and our blood pressure lowers. I mean, it's that simple, really.
And the studies have shown with this machine that you can lower blood pressure, lower those numbers 20 to 30%. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's it.
And so it's called Respirate. I'm going to write it down so you can see. Like that, Respirate.
So that's the name of the machine. Just do a Google search and find somebody that sells it. I don't know who sells it.
Yeah, it's even on Amazon.com, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find used ones also.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a biofeedback machine. So what it's doing is it's teaching you to recognize your breathing, concentrate on it. It's giving it back to you in a sound. Sometimes biofeedback machines give it back to you in a visual, like lights. This one is sound. And so it's making like this connection between your conscious mind and your body. This is what I'm doing. This is how breath feels. This is how slow it needs to be. All those things. So it's a teaching mechanism.
But then it gets you to stretch it out. I mean,
Yes.
It'll program your breathing, so it'll make the sound longer so that you breathe in longer and out longer.
Right.
And it literally, you slow down your breath. And the result of that is the relaxation of muscles everywhere in your body, and in particular, the small blood vessels that are the ones that are like this, that are backing up the pump.
Right, right, exactly.
So how long you do this every day? I mean, for half an hour? Or
Sure.
something?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be a typical thing. I mean, typically they probably recommend that you do it a couple times a day, morning and evening, and you're just sort of retraining. And eventually you get to the point, and the machine sort of tells you that, all right, you've reached the spot where your breathing should result in your blood pressure being down, and people monitor their blood pressure and see that happen.
Right.
One of the physicians that we used to work with in our office, had one of these machines, and he used to give them to his patients to take home to work with a little bit and to see how it worked, monitoring their blood pressure and seeing that didn't need medicine, didn't need anything fancy, just needed to learn to get those muscles to relax.
Right, exactly. So guided visualization is another way to do the same thing. Because as we mentioned just earlier, your subconscious mind cannot discern between reality and fantasy. So visualizing things, and a lot of times in hypnotherapy, you can use any sort of visualization to be an analogy for the blood vessels. So you can think about it like oil going through the pipe tubes in a car, and the engine running and needing to lower the rev of the engine so that the oil moves more effectively through. You could use any kind of visualization. It actually translates really well into your body. I mean, the subconscious mind, the right side of the brain, uses symbols, just like when we dream, to get our messages across. And so guided visualization of finding a way to create that image in your mind of slowing things down and allowing your blood vessels to dilate and everything, your blood to move through more easily, is highly effective. So there are many places online that you can find hypnotherapy or guided imagery CDs that you can listen to that also offer you the same sort of results. They also, in the relaxation process that's included, will help you to slow your breath down as well. I mean, it's all included in the same thing. So there's that. And then, of course, meditation, as I talked about before, and meditation is something that we can practice every day, even just 10 minutes at a time, to help us reconnect. Like, for instance, how, as a joke, you said you don't breathe between 8 to 5. Well, taking 10 minutes every couple of hours to check in with that and say, okay, where am I? Where's my breath? Is my breath moving? Am I tense? Am I just feeling tense, although there's nothing around me that's creating tension? Am I just in a loop of, being worried about something? Is there anything really to worry about? All of these things are questions we can ask ourselves when we slow down, quiet down, turn off the phones, turn off all the music and the stimulus around us, and check in. And it's amazing how just 10 minutes of that can retrain us to stop being so highly hyper-aware and highly attentive to our surroundings, but we can get back to a place of inner peace, and certainly developing a meditation practice of maybe 20 minutes or half an hour in the morning before work or in the evening before bed is extremely healthy. Even just taking 10 minutes a few times during the day to check in with yourself is also equally as beneficial.
And just a word about that, because I think in our society we're taught that any sort of meditative practice or practice where we're not doing something is a wasted time.
Yeah.
I know I certainly was brought up in that environment, that if I was sitting around just like that, that I should be doing something. And we learned that lesson very, to the core. And the truth is, I know for me and for many people that have had this experience, is that when I do take time like that, it actually makes the other time much more productive.
Absolutely.
So if I'm writing an article, I find that if I could just sit and meditate for 5 minutes, that article gets written quicker, it gets written better. I don't miss keystrokes, I type more efficiently, and ultimately end up spending less time doing that article than if I would have if I hadn't taken that 5 or 10 minutes to just sort of center.
Right. Go ahead.
I found one app that I like that's meditative. Do you guys have any that you would recommend?
So we're talking about apps on the phone that are meditative. The one that I have is called, let me look. Let me look.
What's the one you're? Simply Being.
That's
You
nice.
can do 5, 10, 15, or 20, and then you can turn up nature sounds or a brook or the ocean or something, but
Right.
just kind of the same voice all the time.
Right.
I like variety, but
Okay.
Neat. And is it a guided meditation or is it just the sounds?
it's guided. You can do both.
Right.
Yeah, you can tweak.
I think that's
It's
great.
An app, you can kind of tweak. You can let the nature sound be for 5 minutes and then voice or just
Yeah.
Right.
one or the other.
Those can be helpful for sleep as well.
The-
Sometimes, like if I can't sleep well, that's what I'll do.
Cool.
The one I use is called Altered States. And it's got, like you said, tones and sounds and music. You can program it for any amount of time and for different brainwave states. So you can program it for deep sleep all the way up to daydreaming. And it includes tones which work on your brain and your brain waves to completely soothe you, even though you can't physically hear them. They're embedded in the music. So I like that one. That's pretty cool. But I have to say, I make my own meditation CDs. So there's one that I have that's particularly for meditation. It's 10 minutes of guided speaking, so that you're guided into a deeply relaxed state, and then 10 minutes of music, and then it brings you, and then verbally brings you out of it again. So it's altogether about 20 minutes long and provides you with 10 minutes of quiet meditative time. So if anyone's interested in that, just let me know.
There's also a whole series of CDs by this place in Virginia called the Monroe Institute, and they're called HemiSync.
Yes.
And they are designed to get the two hemispheres of your brain in sync and working with each other. So,
And again, using tones to do that. And
Right.
sometimes you can't even hear the tones.
right, so you listen to it with speakers that have right and left, headphones or whatever, and there may be voice, there may not, there may be music, but subliminally there are tones and things happening that actually go left, right, that get and they have specific ones for every sort of issue that you can think of, stress and sleep and, anger.
Creativity, being more awake, being
Learning.
more focused and concentration, all that stuff.
Immune function. They have a whole
Yeah.
series for cancer
Yeah.
that literally gets your immune system working better.
Yeah.
Those are kind of cool.
Right, those are great. And then the next things are, doing some mind-body exercises, and of course we always recommend yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong. Those are some really good ones. But it's oddly enough, seriously, we were watching TV this morning, the news, before we came in, and they actually had a report on the news showing that yoga relaxes anxiety. And what was
It was
the
about
other-
arrhythmias, about helping to
heart
cure heart rhythm problems.
Right, exactly.
There's a study coming out of somewhere.
Yeah. So, more and more we're recognizing how those practices really do calm the whole body down and allow the mind and body to connect more consciously, which is what is the calming mechanism. So, as we're talking about lowering our blood pressure, we're talking about developing a greater awareness of self, a greater connection to what's going on inside of you. Yeah.
Cool.
As well as the supplements that you can take to help.
Right. Right. So let's talk a little bit about those supplements, and sometimes that's what people are really looking for. Just tell me what to take. I'm not a big fan of adopting that attitude because I want people to understand what's going on and how to do it, and yet sometimes it's all right, just tell me what to take.
But
So,
but it's it's helpful
It's a
because
balance.
if you have a magnesium deficiency and I'm telling you to meditate, you need both. It's not just going to be one. So
Yeah.
it's good to know both. Yeah.
Much easier to be able to meditate when you have the ability to relax your muscles. There's no
Yes.
question about that.
Exactly.
Right?
And you're not feeling so anxious.
Yeah. So, okay, so a couple supplements. First of all, fish oil or healthy fats if it's not fish oil. Very, very important. They help cells communicate with each other. That affects brain chemistry. That affects your body's ability to handle sugar. That affects, cells talking to each other. That would be signals to say to the blood vessels, relax or constrict. They help as an anti-inflammatory. They literally lubricate things like joints, and they help relax those blood vessels, especially when the blood pressure has been slowly elevating over time. And so I'm not a fan of a low-fat diet. In fact, there are some of my patients that I recommend that 60% of their calories actually come from fats. So that's animal proteins, including cold Atlantic fish or cold water fish, avocados, and that kind of thing. And ultimately, I don't think that we can get enough of those fats from diet alone, especially the healthy fats. And so we supplement with fish oil. I like fish oil much better than I like the vegetable sources because the body just cannot convert what's in the vegetable sources into the fats that the body needs. So I like fish oil. I get better results than we do with flax oil or something like that. Magnesium, yeah.
You had an outrageously high amount of fish oil that you recommended the other day in terms of how much intake. Give me a sense of what it would be if you're trying to really manage blood pressure.
Outrageous.
Outrageous.
Yeah, same amount. I mean, it depends on the product that you're using. The one that I use most often is by a company called New Chapter, and it's called Whole Mega, and it would be 4 capsules a day, 2 with breakfast and 2 with dinner.
How do you spell it?
Whole, W-H-O-L-E, and then Mega, M-E-G-A, all one word. And the company is New Chapter. It's a great company. They do things in a really interesting way. The reason I like that fish oil is because they do not concentrate to just certain fats in there like EPA and DHA. So when you look at the label, you'll see it has a full array of 15 or 16 different omega fats. They also only get the fish oil from the salmon industry that already exists in Alaska. They actually don't kill any fish for their fish oil. They're using the waste product from that industry that already exists. It's very clean. That company also does testing on their own fish oil. It's the only company that I know of. If you see a study that talks about fish oil, if you hear a company saying fish oil does this or this, they're not talking about their product. They're talking about studies that were done. New Chapter spends literally millions of dollars doing testing on their particular products, and it's the only product that I've seen that after even just 2 of those capsules shows incorporation into cell membranes, shows lowering of LDL, raising of HDL, lowering of triglycerides, and lowering of inflammation markers in the body. It's just the best one out there. The way that we sell it, at that dosage that I just recommended for you, it costs you about $30 a month. So it's definitely can be more expensive than what you get at Sam's Club or whatever, but the quality is different and the results are different. So that's, and there's not a disease state that we could talk about that I wouldn't recommend fish oil for you because of how it helps cells communicate with each other. It's just the most important thing out there. The other nutrient that's really important, again, is magnesium. We are deficient in magnesium unless you're living on a mountain somewhere growing your own food in West Virginia and eating that food that you're growing as you pick it off the vine. We just don't get enough of that. So you have to supplement with it as well, especially if you have a blood pressure issue. And oftentimes, the first step that I'll take with somebody that comes to me with a blood pressure problem is put them on fish oil and put them on magnesium, and oftentimes that's all that's needed, and we start to see some balance in their blood pressure. So magnesium comes in different forms. The most common form that you see out there supplementally is called magnesium oxide. The body does not absorb magnesium oxide very efficiently. So magnesium is, as it goes through your gut, and as it's not getting absorbed, it draws water to it. And so a common side effect of magnesium oxide is getting diarrhea. People actually use it clinically to help treat constipation because it draws water to it and causes evacuation. So a typical dose of magnesium oxide would be 400 milligrams a couple times a day, and that's likely to give people some gut issues. There are other forms of magnesium that are all pretty much equally absorbable from the gut and usable on a cellular level. So there's magnesium citrate, there's magnesium aspartate, there's magnesium glycinate. All of those are pretty much equal as far as the effect goes. And I'll use any one of those things. I like magnesium aspartate the most just because it's the least expensive, and it works very well. Aspartate, A-S-P-A-R-T-A-T-E. You'll find some products that are combinations of aspartate and glycinate and citrate all together. You know, some companies try to make something look, you know, more exotic, and so that people will buy them. So I use magnesium aspartate. 75 milligrams is the capsule, and I'll use anywhere from 2 to 4 capsules a day of that particular product to help with blood pressure. And so oftentimes the first place I start is with the fish oil and the magnesium, and it does the trick. Oftentimes I will, instead of using just magnesium aspartate, I will use potassium magnesium aspartate. So it has a dose of each of those in it. That seems to be more balancing for people because oftentimes potassium is an issue as well. And I've got lots of stories of people, young and old, who, you know, went to the doctor, had a blood pressure problem, were on meds or weren't, that we get them on that regimen and it fixes the problem for them. And that's something to stay on for the rest of your life unless you're able to change your dietary situation where you're able to get enough healthy fats from your food and balanced minerals from your food alone. And those of us who live in normal society, I just don't think it's even possible anymore. I think it's a sad statement, but I don't think it's possible.
So I have a question about low blood pressure.
Uh-huh.
Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah. Let me get through the supplements for high blood pressure, and then I'll definitely mention low blood pressure because that also is an issue, and it's a common issue these days, right? Uh-huh.
Do you have any recommendation of the brand name for this?
You can find a lot of companies that make it. The one that I use is Pure Encapsulations is the company. It's one of the professional companies, so it's not a brand that you'll find around at a local health food store or, you know, Whole Foods or anything, but you will find other brands that make magnesium aspartate as well. Yeah, and as long as it's magnesium aspartate, it really, you know, the company that makes it really doesn't matter. There shouldn't be any quality issues there. It all comes from the same lab ultimately. You've heard of a nutrient called coenzyme Q10, traditionally used to help treat blood pressure issues, to help lower blood pressure. Some really good studies. It has some other effects as well. It's good for heart rhythm issues. It's good for immune function. The reason I like to mention that is because it does help lower blood pressure, and there are a fair amount of prescription medicines that cause a deficiency of coenzyme Q10, including beta blockers, which we oftentimes give as a first line of defense for high blood pressure, and including statin drugs, which oftentimes go along with high blood pressure concerns with cholesterol as well. If you are going to take coenzyme Q10, you should take the active form, which is called ubiquinol, U-B-I-Q-U-I-N-O-L. That your body absorbs and uses 3 to 6 times more efficiently than a traditional CoQ10. So a typical dose for blood pressure would be 100 to 200 milligrams of ubiquinol every day. There's absolutely no downside or side effect to that other than it could be a little bit costly. All right. There are some specialty supplements that we use. There's one that's called bonito peptide. This literally comes from the bonita fish, the tuna. Sure. That is like sort of a natural ACE inhibitor, which is another one of those categories of blood pressure medicines. And so it does it without the side effects that you could get. And I've gotten some results with using that supplement as well. 500 milligrams 3 times a day is the typical dose of that. That also can be a little bit pricey, and is usually a second or third line product for me to use for somebody if other things aren't working. And then the other thing is the adrenal support. If stress is really the issue here and the increase in blood pressure is related to adrenal output and cortisol, using herbs which are known as adaptogens can help calm the adrenal response to stress and calm the physiological results of that. And so again, in certain genetically susceptible people, that's the thing that causes those genes to express themselves to the negative. And so short of learning to interact with your environment differently and to not be affected by your stresses the same way, doing some adrenal support. And so there are herbs, some that you've heard of, like ginseng or licorice, and other ones maybe not. There's a combination of products that we use. It's rare that I say just take this or take that. Actually, licorice can help raise your blood pressure. There's an ingredient in there that can help raise your blood pressure. And so a proper form of licorice and a proper combination can be used to help lower blood pressure that's related to stress. And so my favorite product to use is called Power Adapt by a company called Natura.
I'm going to write that.
Yeah, just write Power Adapt by Natura. It's good handwriting, babe. Okay, so let's talk about low blood pressure. What do you think could cause low blood pressure? Any ideas? Fluid issues. You know, if there's not enough fluid in the tubes, that could cause it. How would you know that you have low blood pressure? Let's ask that first. Any ideas? You get dizzy when you stand up. Right. It's called, the medical name for that is called orthostatic hypotension. And what that means is that when you're sitting down and you stand up, your blood pressure is not sufficient to maintain fluid in your brain for a second or two. And so fluid goes this against gravity, and your blood pressure isn't enough to maintain that, and you go through a second or two of dizziness until things equalize. It's called orthostatic hypotension. And that's usually the easiest way that we know that someone has low blood pressure. You know, you should measure your blood pressure as well to know that. The number one cause of that is stress and adrenal output. There's sort of most people's bodies respond in a very specific way to stress. So at first, when you have excess adrenal output, blood pressure actually gets lower. And then as you continue with that process and your adrenals get burnt out, and or you have a particular genetic tendency towards high blood pressure, the stress can then cause high blood pressure. But the most common reason for low blood pressure is stress as well. And so it's the same answer as far as the adaptogens go. And I have a lot of people who get on that Power Adapt or other formulas that help affect adrenal function, and then they start to maintain their blood pressure. Another common symptom of low blood pressure, poor circulation. So your hands and your feet in the extremities are constantly cold, you know. And I do some body work with some patients, a form of treatment that's called Bowen therapy, and I can always tell when I've had stressful days because my patients say, oh, your hands are real cold, you know. And a patient of mine recently reminded me that my hands used to chronically be cold, and that when I started to take care of myself better, especially in relation to stress, it didn't happen anymore. And I've worked on this woman for years, and the other day she said to me, you know, your hands haven't been cold for a while. I was like, yeah, it's because I've been taking care of myself and getting my sleep. So that's usually the most common thing, and that's the way to fix it.
Can I mention,
of course.
We have on our website a stress questionnaire that you can take, and it allows us to work with a protocol of identifying 5 different kinds of stress: overtired, mentally exhausted, stressed and wired, stressed and anxious, and stressed and hot. And each one uses different kinds of adaptogens and different kinds of herbs to help quiet the body. So that might be an interesting thing to do. It just takes 5 minutes. It's completely free, and you could fill it out and find out where you are level-wise on the stress scale and which one you fall in.
Right, what stress type you are.
Right, exactly. And so you can, you know, begin to treat that appropriately.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, stressed and wired, generally you don't get a low blood pressure. Stressed and tired, you would get a low blood pressure. We would use different herbs specifically to treat that. Because if one person was an over-responder to stress, and when they got stressed, they got nervous and anxious, and their brain was healthy, crazy, couldn't quiet it down, if we gave that person some ginseng, it would actually make them worse, right? If we had somebody that was stressed and depressed, that when they get stressed, they're down, If we gave them something that relaxed them, they get more down. You know, so there's like different stress types, and sometimes we get more specific. What other questions?
Is that the most common reason for being cold? Like that would be like one of my things. I just kind of tend to be on the cooler side of the spectrum.
Extremities?
Both, sometimes both.
Yeah. Yeah, so that can be a stress response. It can also be a genetic tendency, and it can be about circulation. Sometimes, you know, circulation isn't happening the way it should for a lot of different reasons. And so it's worth exploring further and experimenting with. But I would say for someone your age and your body type, stress would be the most common, or my first guess at it.
So are there any supplements for the low blood pressure?
Are there supplements for the low blood pressure? Same thing, those adaptogens, adrenal support. I've had doctors tell patients who have come in with low blood pressure, oh, just eat more salt, you know. And that may support, because that excess salt can cause fluid retention, which then keeps more fluid within that closed system of tubes, which, you know, can raise the blood pressure. That's not a healthy answer. You know, a healthy answer is adrenal support. What other questions?
Can you just say what is considered low blood pressure, like what the numbers would be?
She asked if we could say what the numbers are considered low blood pressure. It's going to vary from person to person. And really, we want to know the functional result of the blood pressure to know that. And so, you know, for me, having a blood pressure of 110/70, I function great. For someone else, that may be a high blood pressure. For someone else, that may be a low. It depends on their exercise and how their body works. So it really is going to be individual. Classic normal blood pressure is 120/80. That's sort of what we kind of learn as that's the benchmark, right? And I've got some patients who have, you know, 110/60 chronically, and they do great. And I have other ones that, as we lower their blood pressure, it gets too low, and we start to see symptoms. Part of that is because they're used to being at this level, and then their body can adjust slowly. Yeah. So exercisers, especially endurance athletes, have a tendency to have lower blood pressure at rest. Right? Your blood pressure has a tendency to be lower.
Right, yeah. Yoga, if you practice a lot of yoga or the other mind-body exercises, you're going to be much lower. Yeah.
What other questions?
Well, you brought up exercise. Is there any type, the other day you were talking about aerobic and anaerobic exercise, different things like that. To me, I think exercise is just good, period. But
Right.
are there certain things to really focus on if you're trying
To
bring
lower
your blood pressure?
to lower blood pressure.
Lower or higher, whichever.
Yeah. So the term I would say is normalize.
Okay.
And I would say that exercise across the board normalizes blood pressure. So when you're exercising, your blood pressure will go up. It's supposed to go up. And that also is what allows it to go back down after the exercising. When you are exercising, if you're monitoring blood pressure or heart rate, and you know, you can sort of make the assumption that as heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up as well. You want to see variations in your blood pressure and your heart rate within your exercise regimen. Getting on a treadmill and just running for 30 minutes at the same pace doesn't serve you as well as running faster and slower and faster and slower. But generally speaking, genetic expression is going to be more to the positive when you are getting regular exercise. Genetic expression is going to be more to the positive when you have more muscle. Loss of muscle mass as we age is one of the major markers of aging. So those of us that as we get older have declined health have a tendency to have less muscle mass. And that's also the importance of exercise as we're getting older and starting it at a younger place, you know, at a younger age if possible as well. Anything else about the exercise?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Emotionally, it's also most beneficial when you find an exercise that you enjoy. So, you know, all of that is very true, and find the one that you love. You know, if you love to swim, swim and do some sprints. You know, if you love to walk, walk but do some hills. You know what I mean? So find the one that really makes you want to do it, because anytime you go into an exercise with a negative attitude, it's counterproductive. Not 100% counterproductive, but
you're not going to stick with it, that's for sure.
well, that's true.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100% what you're saying.
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
something that you really want to
Right.
Right.
There was a study years ago that showed that people lost like 20% more weight when they listened to music while they exercised. So that just shows you that we want to have some enjoyment out of it, something that, you know, brings our endorphins up and, you know, something we look forward to.
The other thing I'm glad you reminded me about the walking. I had thought about when you were talking about the breathing is that there's an exercise that you can do even when you just go out and walking, and that is extending your breath. Like play this game where, you know, at first when you breathe in for 3 steps and then out for 3 steps, and in for 3 steps and out for 3 steps, and then start doing it in for 4 steps and out for 4, and see how far you can go. And at first you may only be able to go up to 4 or 5 before it doesn't feel comfortable. Next time you go out, you might find you go out to 6 and go out to 7. It's sort of a walking, breathing, meditative practice that you can do that also has that result of really learning to breathe better. So, well, thank you guys. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for
Appreciate
coming
the offer
today.
to come out here. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
The website is wellbeing. Oh yeah, you want to write that down also?
Oh, sure.
It's wellbeinggps.com. Your navigation tool to being well. And so on the website, we have a lot of content. All of our webinars that we do live are recorded and put in there. And so there's 15 or 16 of them in the archives now about all sorts of things, and osteoporosis and menopause and weight loss and vitamin D and the flu and cholesterol and sleep.
We have a direct link from our website.
Oh, we do? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
From the Hunter Douglas Wellness, is it the wellness portal?
HD Windows 12.
Very cool. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. You bet.